I am so honored to bring this next interview to you. Welcome, Omisade Burney Scott. This interview felt like pure medicine to me. Omisade and I invited our beloved Cynthia Brown. She was with us during the entire interview. Omi shares about being a death doula and what it means to create conditions for people to transition with dignity and self-determination. Omi shares about what it truly means to conjure and be witnessed in the process. Omisade is a founding member of Spirit House and the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. Omisade is a Black Southern feminist, mother, and healer with decades of experience in nonprofit leadership, philanthropy, and social justice. Grounded in an analysis of systems of oppression, she has trained extensively in identity politics, intersectionality, and liberatory organizing practices. Omisade sees herself as an organizational development midwife, facilitating major transitions that social justice, nonprofits, groups, marginalized communities must make in order to remain relevant, responsive, intentional, healthy, and sustainable. As a healer and a skilled facilitator, she is particularly skilled in creating brave and open spaces that facilitate people to dig down deep into their own power and create their own solutions. She is the creator and curator of the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause podcast. She currently resides in Durham, North Carolina, and is the proud mother of two sons, Chase, 27, and Taj, who's 11. I hope you enjoy this interview.
It's as the old Black folks say, it's good to be seen and not viewed.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, that's real. We've known each other for a while.
At least I think almost 15 years. Is that sound feel right?
Yeah. I don't remember where we first met in person. I knew of you and then we met, but I don't remember where.
I feel like I met you around the time I was working at the Warner Foundation.
Okay.
And if that's accurate, then that was like 2003, like 2002, 2003-ish, like in that window or whatever. Mm-hmm.
And then we just stayed connected and in community since that time. Thank you for saying yes to participating in the Healing and Community Summit, which it's all about grief and liberation. And so that's what we're gonna talk about today.
Awesome. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, I'm honored that you're here. I would love for you to share some about what you do in the world, the work you do in the world, and what you practice, just to share with people watching or listening.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because I'm coming to the tail end in December of a year-long creative sabbatical. So I have been actually unlearning or disassociating myself from what I do in the world and who I am, or what I do in the world and what I want to be. And it's been really good and it's been really hard. So I think a lot of people in North Carolina or maybe in different parts of the country know me as somebody who does social justice work, right? So they're like, Omi's a facilitator, she's a trainer, she's a convener, she's a person who holds space. She does work around partnership stuff to kind of help people figure out the things that they want to do and change, right? And that's been about 25 years worth of journey. And I found myself experiencing a lot of upheaval, which is interesting that this conversation is about grief, because I've held a lot of grief around my experiences in 2018. We lost our first sibling last July, unexpectedly. And then Hurricane Florence came through and just ravaged my hometown of New Bern. It was such an intense experience, not only tracking the storm and trying to make sure that my eldest sister, who's 72, and her granddaughter and her great-grandson could be boat evacuated safely. It was also how can I go home and support rebuilding and not swoop in and be disrespectful of folk who have never left New Bern, who've been doing good work, and show up in a way that's hey, I see you, how can I help? And then I got fired from my job. And I've never been fired before, like ever in my entire life. And I was like, did I just get fired?
Right.
And it was trippy. I was like, okay. It took a minute for that to land on me. Like, you know, you actually just got asked to leave an organization where you've been doing what I consider really good work. I was doing reproductive justice work. But there were some internal dynamics that now I can own my own part of, that just made it like untenable for me to stay for the person who decided to let me go. They were like, you gotta go. And if I had not been fired, I probably would have stayed in that organization and would not be in a place of a different level of healing that I've experienced in a long, long time, around my own identity, around vulnerability, around exploration of my true self. You know, 2 years past 50. So this whole idea of me being in this second half of my life and like, well, who you want to be when you grow up now?
Right.
You know, it's the question you get asked when you're a little person. Who do you want to be when you grow up? When you hit 50, you get to ask yourself that again. Well, who you want to be when you grow up? You know, who do you want to be? Not what do you want to do?
Right.
But who do you want to be? And I want to be a happy, healthy, emotionally grounded, generous, loving person. Like, that's who I want to be. And so this past year has like been an invitation to explore, like, well, what does it take, Omi, for you to be that person? Be that person and not be that person striving for perfection, right? Like recognizing that you're not always going to be good at what you want to be, and you're not always going to be successful, and you're going to have some challenges, but you can still be committed to that practice of being who you authentically want to be with your true self. And so that's what I've been up to. And so it's interesting because I think for folk who haven't done work in the nonprofit industrial complex, they don't know how fraught it is with identity and title. Like, who are you? Who do you work with? What campaigns have you done? What have you written a book yet? You know, like who's your trainer? Who's your mentor? Like, it is so like, it's intense. And it's intense in a way. I don't know the corporate world, so I'm imagining that there's some shadows that it mirrors in the corporate world, but it's intense. It's intense to show up in spaces and folk be like, so who do you work for now, Omi? Or what are you doing, Omi? And I'm like, I'm just chilling. And they're like, must be nice, which is the second response to I'm just chilling. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a similar experience of, or just sat with the question of who do I want to be, because so much gets wrapped up in what we do, right? What we create, what we produce, just because of culture, instead of how do we want to be, right? We're alive, and how do we want to use this time that we're in these bodies in this lifetime? So I really appreciate what you said about who do you want to be now, right? At age 2 years past 50. Yeah, that you're sitting with that question and living into that and working into that question. Yeah.
Trying.
Yeah. So given that you already mentioned grief, that this conversation is about grief and liberation, why do you feel like it's important to talk about grief and liberation now? I think it's always been important, and I haven't been in many spaces where people talked about grief openly. And so unless it's been intentional space that we've created. So why is it important to talk about it now, given everything that's going on in the community and the world and our country all over the place?
I feel like in the world, in our communities, in communities of color, in the Black communities, we have like cycles of consciousness raising around different things. You know, like the politicalization that happens to people to realize, oh, you mean there's a whole ass system out here that has impacted what I believe about myself, how I move in the world, what I have access to, where I live, who I can marry, what my kids have access. Like, you mean there's a whole ass system? And I feel like as people come to grips with that, like there's these iterations of like burst of consciousness. And I think we're in a new iteration of a burst of consciousness around what grief and trauma does to our bodies. I think people are realizing or are coming to grips with, if I hold something inside, it poisons me. Or if I don't acknowledge my emotions, I'm shutting off a part of my body. I'm all but putting a tourniquet on some part of my body that eventually will lose use. You know, I won't be able to use it because I've tightened that grip on it. And the grief piece is been really interesting. I think all of we've seen in terms of the violence against Black bodies, Black and brown bodies over the last 10 years or so, like people are starting to come to grips with like, what does this mean for our mental health? The advent of social media and people like either experiencing great like rushes of grief and emotion and also the numbing, you know, people becoming kind of anesthetized to like, did I just see somebody get shot? Oh, okay, well, let me go to this meeting. Or did I just see somebody get shot? I'm really affected by it, but now I got to go to this meeting because now we're going to organize around it. And like, I got to pack what I saw down into a tight ass box so I can get in these streets and do something about it because I know that the systemic monster is real. Like that's what I've been already doing. And so there was no moments of breath. Like it just felt like people couldn't catch their breath. It felt like people couldn't look at someone and say, I'm feeling a little crazy right now. Like I feel really stressed right now in my body. I need some help. People just kept pressing forward. And so as people pressed forward, we started to see manifestations of it, even more obvious manifestations of depression and anxiety and people kind of self-medicating themselves in ways like self-harming or toxic relationships. And I think folk have just gotten to a place where like, yo, this has we got to change something. And I don't think it's pervasive throughout. I think in the water that I swim in, I've been seeing more people who do social justice work trying to grapple with grief, trying to grapple with what they've seen, what they've experienced firsthand, grief that they experience is like community level grief, but also very personal grief. I think that people are seeing that grief is not just about loss of life, it's about loss of relationship, right? And so that when you get a relationship gets disrupted for whatever reason, there's grief around that and like how people are being honest about that as they move into new relationships. Like where's the opportunity or the invitation for them to do healing around that? Because we see very publicly people being disassociated from movement work, organizations, communities, and they just kind of go away and you're like, where's so-and-so? Like, oh, you know, they don't really, you know, get down with them anymore. They're not cool no more. And you're like, well, are they okay? And folks are like, I don't know. You're like, oh, that's intense to think that someone who was so fully present in a movement space is no longer present, but they're not dead. And like, how are they managing that grief? How are the people around them who are no longer in community with them also managing that grief? So I just think we're in a time period where it's so intense. Like it's so intense. It's like prickly intense. And folks are like, I have got to figure out like how I want to be. And I think the connection to the liberation piece, and Mama Nia and I from Spirit House talk about this all the time. I do not want to show up in liberation busted up and broke down, Michelle. Like if the analogy is that we all jump in this car and we show up in this amazing green, crisp, cool place that's called liberation, but I can't get out the car because my leg is fucked up and I'm crazy.
Right.
I don't want that. I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for anybody. Now I do want people to show up however they show up, right? however they show up. I also want us to do the work so that way folk can show up in some level of healing, right? Some level of acknowledgement, some level of work having been done to be like, I want you to be able to take full advantage of this liberatory space. I want you to access it. I want you to feel it. I want you to smell it. I want you to enjoy it. And for that to be possible, there's work required around grief.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for you? What you just named about, you know, the connection between grief and liberation and how we show up in spaces. And also, I mean, it's tied to what you said about folks doing organizing work, movement work, social justice work, and there not being space to breathe, right?
Yeah.
As we're responding to the next thing that happened, right? The trauma that's happening to us and around us. So what does it look like for you to be in liberatory spaces where there's been room for grief and processing and moving through what's present?
So I think the first thing that really comes to mind is me acknowledging that I have a really amazing, dynamic core group of people that I'm blessed to be in relationship with. Mm-hmm. We call each other tribe. We call each other friends, sister, brother, whatever. They are folk who I have been in relationship with for 15 years or more. Some of them might actually be family members. But there's a group of folk who I feel like know who I want to be, have seen me be successful, have seen me struggle, have seen me fall flat on my face, have, you know, experienced me in my shadow where my ego like shows up bright and they're like, oh, she is not grounded right now. Mm-hmm. You know, that is not a grounded Omi right now. That's a scared Omi right now. And when Omi is like really scared, her fear or her grief shows up very performative. You know, I have a very strong performative mask. So I think the first place where I think I have been like really testing out like being fully honest and vulnerable is with that group of people, that small group of people that I can say some of the hardest things to, and I don't expect them to fix it for me. I expect them to hold it with me. It's like getting in a boat, right? It's like, all right, I'm about to get in this boat again and do some truth telling to myself around who I am or a situation or where I want to be. Can you get in the boat with me? And they're like, yes, we can get in the boat with you. And they're like, when we get in the boat, like, what do you want? You want us to like help you steer the boat? Do you just want us to sit still? Do you want us to just listen? Do you want us to respond? Like, it's gotten to that kind of place where like that kind of inquiry happens where I'm like, I just need to process. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, no, I need your opinion. Like, okay. Or no, I'm so overwhelmed right now. I need you to help me steer this boat. And they're like, okay. So I feel really blessed to have that. I also feel exceptionally blessed to have a sweet bridge between my therapeutic support with my therapist and spiritual support and grounding with my spiritual community. Like, I've been seeing the same therapist off and on now for the past 15 years. And I decided about 3 years ago when I got diagnosed with clinical depression to stop using my therapist like a life vest or an emergency situation like triage. I was like, I'm gonna start using you like a multivitamin, right? Like you're gonna be a prophylactic. I'm gonna stop, like because I was always like, wait till I got to a place of the edge of crisis or full on in crisis, then I rush back. And they would receive me, you know, because that's what therapists do. They're like, yes, let's talk about where you are. And then I was like, you know what I would like to do? And they were like, what? I was like, I would like to shift our relationship so that way I'm in a consistent, continuous space with you. So even if I come to you and things are great, we still get to process how I'm like enjoying that great moment, enjoying that joyful moment, enjoying that happiness, and like how me having more awareness around how I feel about joy. in the same way how I feel about grief and trauma and sadness. Because I felt like I wasn't exploring that part. I was like, let's just do the deep dive on the hard stuff. No deep dives on the good stuff to be like, so what does this feel like? And like, how do you enjoy this? Right? And then with my spiritual practice, you know, I started practicing Ifa Yoruba, which is the spiritual and kind of cultural practice born out of Southwest Nigeria, right, since 1996, 97. That's when I, like, the spark first hit me, was like, what is this thing? I'm really interested in, like, finding a spiritual path or walk or tradition that is African centered, that potentially comes from a place where I come from, right? And I found that. And then I got initiated in the tradition in 2013 in Nigeria. So I am a novice priest, right? So I'm in this first 7 years of now being given permission to learn even more deeply, right? Which is another part of the journey. Like, people think, oh, you're a priest, so you can really do all kinds of like tricks now, right? You got the green light to be out here like shaking it, you know, like, ooh, look at me, I'm a priest. I'm like, now being initiated gives you permission to learn more, gives you permission to learn more hands-on, gives you permission to look behind the veil so you can learn what they did to make it possible for this person to participate in this rites, ritual, or whatever. So it's been really interesting when people like find out that I'm initiated. They're like, oh, well, can you do a reading for me? Or can you do this? Can you do that? I'm like, yo, so there's some things that I do, but I don't hang out a shingle. And the first place I get to be a priest is in my own home. The very first place, with my family. And so if I'm not doing the work at home with myself, with the boys, with my siblings, then I absolutely am not going to be out here in the community like calling folk forth and being like, yeah, come, I have office hours, come, I can do this thing for you, I can do this thing. That's not how it's working for me. That's not my priestly walk. My priestly walk is to first heal my home, and heal myself, heal my family, and then to continue to learn. And you know, it's a dynamic process for me. But I think that has also facilitated so much learning around death and dying, and the relationship that transcends the physical world. And I started practicing before my parents passed away. And the relationship that I have with my ancestors continues to grow and become more multidimensional with every year. And I definitely know that being in this tradition, being in this practice has facilitated that. Yeah.
I was looking at my ancestor altar this morning because I was creating a new moon altar on a table that's near my ancestor altar. And I saw Cynthia Brown's picture. And I mean, I can't help but like want to bring her into this conversation. Yeah. She's already here.
She's here. She's like, look at them talk. What y'all talking about, girl? What y'all, Michelle? What y'all talking about? Okay then. Y'all so deep.
I can hear her.
Did you hear her saying that? Y'all so deep, girl.
Yes, I can so hear her. And I know that you were, Jasper's jumping down now. I know that you were with her when she transitioned. And there's a question I have about lessons you've learned from grief. And I'm just wondering if you'd share lessons that you learned from Cynthia, actually. I want to change the question because both of us love her and spent time with her and worked with her and in different ways and sometimes in similar ways. And I would love to uplift any things you want to share about her and lessons she's offered and continues to offer.
Yeah. You know, Cynthia was one of the first people that I met when I started working in Durham. I started working in Durham in 1995. And folk were like, you need to meet this sister, Cynthia Brown. And I was like, well, who is Cynthia Brown? And everybody was like, Cynthia Brown. Ooh, this is a bad sister. I said, oh, okay. And I remember we went out for lunch and I was just in awe of her whole presentation. The warmth with which she greeted me, even meeting me for the first time, it was a warmth. When we started to develop a working relationship, her responsiveness to me and questions and my learning around the landscape in Durham, like how she made herself available to me, I was like, this is so generous. Like I can't like the word that keeps coming to mind about when I first met Cynthia was like how generous she was with her time, which was tight because the entire time I knew Cynthia, and I know you probably feel the same way, she was always moving.
Yeah.
She always had multiple things going on, multiple projects, partnerships, relationships. She was moving. So when she was available, when she was home, and if I reached out and say, listen, I need to come and like ask you a question, or I need to build with you, and she's like, come on, girl. I can meet you tomorrow morning, or I can meet you tomorrow evening, or whatever. And she would squeeze me right on in. And as our relationship evolved into a sisterhood, right? I think that lessons from Cynthia was like she was always learning, and she was very funny about her learning. Like if she had a failure, she could laugh at herself, be like, girl, I thought I was doing something. And man, was I wrong. And I appreciated like her transparency as someone who many people, including myself at the beginning, would look at from the outside looking in, like, she got it all together. She got it all together. She ain't got no fear. She knows her stuff. She got these relationships. She don't know failure or whatever. And she would be like, no, ma'am. Let me tell you about the time I messed up. Let me tell you about the time I effed up. Let me tell you about the time where I fell flat on my face. Let me tell you what I'm still learning, what I'm grappling with. Let me tell you how I got corrected. Like I was out here thinking I was moving in the right way or using the right language, and then I got corrected, and I had to be like, oh, thank you for correcting me, because I was out here loud and wrong, you know? And I was like, this is an important thing to remember as we age and change and continue to have lived experiences, the beautiful healing that's possible for yourself and the people who are around you being transparent around what you're learning, as opposed to acting like you got all your shit together, because you don't, is a huge gift. And that was such a gift. Like I had thought about her so much during the sabbatical. Like I know she would have been tickled. She'd be like, girl, what you doing? Well, come over here and tell me what you're learning. And if I, the deep dive, we would go on the scary parts or the surprising hard parts. She'd be like, girl, I know. Isn't that something? Like the affirmation of what you're experiencing is real, whether it's hard, whether it's sad, whether it's anger, whether it's funny, whether it's surprising, whether it's sexy. All the things you're experiencing are real because you're real. And ain't that a beautiful thing? Ain't that something? Like I feel like she would be like, ain't that something? Right? When Cynthia got sick, her inviting us to be fully engaged in her journey was a huge gift. It was like, all right, y'all, here's the situation. And I'm gonna fight it. And so, that's what we all did, right? We all kicked in. She was like, here's the invitation. Here's my truths. Here's what I know. And based on what I know and my truth, this is how I'm gonna move. And so we all, as her friends and her community, got to move with her. She's like, I'm going this way. So I felt like we were, it was like almost like murmuration, right? So from wherever we were, however close or far, we just moved with her. She's like, all right, y'all, I'm gonna keep moving. We were like, okay, you going that way? We're going this way. We go, what? Oh, we're going back that way. Okay, cool. And then when it became clear that her body was like, it's time for me to rest permanently. Like it is not time for me to fight anymore. It's time for me to rest. When she sent that out, we shifted. And I think that was also a gift to learn how to follow someone's lead. We think, having done reproductive justice work, and we talk about bodily autonomy so much, people think that bodily autonomy is only associated with a person's ability to decide when and if they're going to have a child and under what conditions they have a child, right? Bodily autonomy is just that. It's the agency to be able to do what you want to do as it relates to your body, your health, your living, your viability, all those decisions. And for folk to trust that you actually know what you want to do with your own body, even in dying. Even in dying. And so the bodily autonomy that Cynthia exhibited, modeled around, I trust this body. I'm going to fight for this body. I'm going to entrust these people with my body. And for us to be able to trust her and be like, okay, well, if she's going to trust these people, we're going to trust Cynthia, and we're going to follow her lead. And then when she was like, and now this body needs rest. Like, I fought a good fight. I really did. But it's time for me to be clear that it's time for me to rest. Won't y'all come with me on this journey? And we were like, yeah, we will. I still have a text message in my phone that every year in November, because it's the anniversary for transition, I read that text message. On November the 11th of 2016, I got a text message from Cynthia, and it says, hey sis, give me a call. I want to talk to you about my memorial service. I need your help. I did not want that conversation, It was like, oh shit just got real again with this person who's always been real with me, always been generous with me. You want me to help you with your memorial service? Oh, come on now, man. And we had just that October helped her cut her last braids, because she had actually 16 braids left on her head. And she was like, girl, I got to cut these last little braids. They are hanging on by a thread. Can you please come over here and do some ritual with me and cut these braids? So me and Nia and Donna Latimer and Ebony, we went over and we were like, all right, honey, I think the vet was with us too. We're going to cut these braids. And we all got over there and we did ritual with her. We thank those last 16 braids for walking that journey with her. Look at this. Look at these beautiful, strong braids that walk with you on this journey with this cancer. It's time for them to rest too. It's okay. It's time for them to rest too. Give thanks for them. So each person cut 2 to 3 braids, and when we cut her braids, we spoke gratitude to her hair, to her body, to her around. Look how you've walked this journey with so much honesty, right? Honesty, bravery, transparency, courage, realness. The realness of like, this shit ain't fun. This ain't fun. I'm not a saint. I'm a real person. And so we cut each braid. And she invited me again into this very personal, intimate space of, help me plan my memorial. So, and when I called her, she was like, can you come over? I said, yeah, because Satana was over there with her, helping her get her records in order, her paperwork in order. And Satana had been like walking with her in such a firm, strong, it's like when you're in your house, there are support beams that are not visible to you. But if somebody came in and knocked one of those support beams off, your house would fall. Satana was a support beam for Cynthia those last several months, like the entire process, but in particular those last several months, where she was just like, boom, steady. And she was like, well, Satana over here getting this paperwork together, and I need some help getting this memorial together. Can you come over? I said, sure. And I went over, and she was like, and I need you to call Mama Nia. So I said, okay. And I called Nia, and Nia cried. She said, I don't want to have the conversation. I said, yep, I get it. Let's talk about it. Like me and Satana had our several conversations where we cried to each other, right? We cried to each other. We're like, get it out. Come on. Let's have, how you feeling? What you need? All right. When we go back in there, we good, right? We're good. And so we did that. And so when she said, I would also like for you to create an ancestor altar in preparation for me. And I was like, okay. So I talked to the vet. I said, she wants, it's almost like when people are preparing for a baby to be born and they start nesting and they set the room up. They pick the colors, the blankets, they wash all the clothes. Everything's in a row, the booties, the onesies, everything's ready for the baby's arrival, right? That's what we did for her. We prepared for her to become an ancestor. We prepared for her to become an ancestor. We said prayers to our ancestors, to our old ones, to say, can you get her folks ready for her arrival? She's on her way. She's on her way. It's clear that the time is here. So we need y'all to be ready to receive her as well. So we created an altar at her home, and we did prayer. We did ritual. We were like, we know that she's going to be making her transition, and we want y'all to receive her well. So get prepared. Whatever work is necessary on that side for y'all to be prepared to receive your daughter, your niece, your grandbaby, your friend. Get ready because she's coming, right? So we did that. And then when we were at the hospital, once again, she's teaching us as she's making her transition. She's teaching us. And we're all in the emergency room, and we're standing around the bed, and Sterling Freeman was getting ready to say a prayer. And before he said the prayer, he said, Cynthia, do you want to say something before we pray? She said, yeah. And this is right after Trump got elected. And she said, y'all, which is such a Cynthia thing. Y'all, this is a mess. And we were like, like you get ready to transition, and you're like having this moment of like, we in a political shit show right now. And she said, I thought I was gonna make it with y'all. I really did. I thought I was gonna be able to fight this thing and beat this thing and continue on. She said, but I'm not. And I've made my peace with that, right? But y'all gotta keep fighting. Y'all gotta keep fighting, and y'all can't leave anybody behind. You gotta promise me you're gonna keep fighting a good fight, and you're not gonna leave anyone behind. You promise? We all say, yeah, we promise. We promise. She said, all right. Sterling did the prayer. She went upstairs. I went home and changed clothes. I called the vet. I called Mama Nia. I said, y'all ready? And they were like, yeah, we ready. I called Satana. I said, we're on our way back to the hospital. She said, okay, folk are starting to arrive. Her family was starting to arrive. Women's group was starting to arrive. She said, I'll see you when you get here, okay? I said, okay. And we were walking down the hall. The whole women's group was standing out in the hall. Tima and Julia, Jeanette, Melinda, Ellen, everybody standing out in the hall. Like, here we come. As Satana looked out, she called us to the room. She was like, hey, girl. And we just stayed with her. We created a smaller ancestor altar in her room. And that time period between coming to the hospital, her family members being able to come in and spend time with her and love up on her and kiss her and say their goodbyes, to her slipping more fully out of consciousness, was just sweet. There was a sweetness to it, a sweetness. The doctor who was on duty that night, Snehal,
yes,
You can't make this up, Michelle. You know the story. You cannot make this up to have this person who Cynthia has known since he was a student at Duke be the doctor on duty as she was making her transition. It was like, this is so Cynthia Brown to have, like, because she knows everybody. It's like also the thing of like, Cynthia knows everybody. Of course she knows everybody. Of course she's going to know the doctor on duty who's going to be there as she makes her transition. And he was so gentle and honest and transparent with her family. Here's where we are. This is what's happening now. Do you have any questions? How can I support you? Never had a doctor I can recall speak in that manner of humanity with a family member. It was just it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And so while we were in the room, you know, we just kind of like were in a rhythm of talking and praying and humming and singing and touching and kissing. And I remember Satana saying the Delta Sweetheart song in her ear. We also played music. We played some funky music too, because you know Cynthia loved her music. So we also played some fun, funky music. We laughed, you know. And she just, in the same, we wanted her to hear, because my understanding from this work that we find ourselves attached to of death and dying is that hearing is the last sense to go. That's my understanding. I'm not sure how people know that's true, but it's okay for me to believe that, you know. And so as it was clear that her body was getting colder from her feet, we just started talking more to her and telling her, you were doing such a good job. Look at you. You're doing such a good job. When I've been a doula for folk, and I'm a lay doula, so I don't charge people. You know, people ask me, Omi, can you be with me when I have my baby? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. It's cool. When people are at that ring of fire, when they're just like, when they have gotten, either they're tired or they've been pushing for a long time and they're just like, I actually don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Like, I don't know if this is going to happen. That moment, those moments of encouragement around, your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do in your own way, not in someone else's way, in your own way. You need to take a break, take a break. You need to get up, get up. You need to take a sip of water, take a sip of water. You need to rest, close your eyes, take a little quick nap. Like whatever you need, because this is 150% about you doing what you want to do in this moment to get this baby here. And it's the same way when someone's dying. Like giving them the encouragement to say, your body is doing exactly what it was actually made to do, and that's to die. And you're doing a great job. And you don't have to worry. We are right here. We're touching you. We see you. We feel you. We can hear you. And as her breath got slower, we were like, look at you. You're so amazing. So it's that encouragement. And, you know, I had that similar experience with my mom when she made her transition, of the encouragement to actually surrender to your body, and let your body do what it was made to do. The submission to that, and having someone be there with you to help you submit, is a gift. It's a gift. So I think about Cynthia all the time. When I have a picture of her and Pearl Shelby Sharp at my front door. So when I leave to go out, or when I come back, they're looking right at me. They're looking right at me. And I have thought about both of them, but Cynthia in particular, over this last year of sabbatical. Like I would have been a pain in her ass. I would have picked her brain so much around, like, girl, this lack of relationship I have with rest and the unlearning I have around the need to be productive, because if I'm productive, then I'm valued. And if I'm valued, then I'm loved. And oh, what a conversation we would have had about that revelation. you know? So I talk to her a lot.
Thank you for sharing everything you shared about Cynthia and your experiences with her, and just the way you talked about transitioning and death and allowing the body to do what it's meant to do, and encouraging people in those moments when they're transitioning is so powerful, because it feels, in my experience, it feels counter to what dominant culture has conditioned us to do.
Yes.
And so I think it's so powerful to create ritual and space. And Cynthia also created that, right? She asked for, this is how I want this to be. This is how I want my memorial. This is how it's going to go. And so she cultivated that energy and space so y'all could be there, right? And support her in her transition, and which feels like such a gift.
Yeah. Huge
and
gift.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, because it feels so counter to, like, we have to create spaces and ways of doing this. I'm wondering what this might look like on a collective scale, like for us to actually work with death and dying in the way that you just articulated to us. Like what would support us collectively, culturally, in doing that?
Right. I've been thinking about that a lot. I think that we actually really don't have a relationship with our own lives. Like like to even begin to like dive into a deeper conversation or relationship or understanding around our connection and feelings about death and dying. Like we don't even like fully live out loud, honestly, with radical honesty and vulnerability. So I think that's the place to begin. Is like, what is the thing that readies the ground for people to move in a practice around vulnerability? Because I think that being present to a few people make their transition is like the highest level of vulnerability for that person. And also like for me was also a place of like, how do I give up my assumptions around what should happen? How do I give up my own fears around death and dying? How do I give into it? This leaning into this places of discomfort, and seeing the beauty in discomfort, the love in discomfort, that's giving you something that you didn't even know you needed, is a new thought process for me. And I've been thinking about this piece here that you and I are talking about. It's like, what does the collective get to learn from the hard parts of this lived life? And it really starts with this journey around vulnerability and radical honesty. It really does. Like, at our most vulnerable moments, what is the gift that we are giving, and what's the gift that we are receiving at our most vulnerable moments, when we are being radically honest about the truth, what we're experiencing, where we're going, how we're feeling? What's the gift? You know? And so if we begin to be, and you know this because of all of your practices, you know, your spiritual practice, your yoga practice, your social justice practice, you know, we are not good at our practice every day. And I've asked people this question. I was like, how many people have a practice? And people raise their hand. Like, I've been asking this when we do the intergenerational conversations associated with the podcast. I ask people at the beginning of the conversation, how many people have a practice? Everybody raises their hand, whether it's a spiritual practice, religious practice, physical practice. So like, are you good at it every day? And everybody raised their hand like, no, I am not. But are you committed to it? Yes. So how do you get into a deeper commitment? How do you lean into a deeper commitment? Which means you're going to have to lean into some real discomfort. I remember the very first yoga class I went to. I don't think I breathed much during during that class. It was so funny because Claudia kept like walking around and whispering in my ear, like, breathe. And I didn't realize I was holding my breath. And I also was competing. I was competing with myself. I was competing with the people standing next to me because I wanted approval that I was doing the most amazing downward facing dog you have ever seen in your entire life. And that if I got that approval, that made me special. And when people are special, they're loved, right? Because we all just want to be loved, right? And so I look back on that and I laugh because it's like, oh, you weren't breathing and you were you like the ego that was like present with me was so intense. So intense. And if you're in a practice of like letting that ego like die, right? And leaning into these places of discomfort and being like, this is not a comfortable position. This is not a comfortable posture. This is not a comfortable asana. This is not a comfortable thought. This is not a comfortable moment. I got to lean into it anyway. Because there's love here. There's a gift here. There's learning here. There's a breakthrough here for me. If I could just lean into it. If I could just lean into it, you know, and be like, okay, I don't have to push past it and harm myself, but I can lean into it and get to that edge and sit at that edge and be like, this is quite a lesson. This is quite a lesson. What you gonna do with it, Omi? What's the lesson for you? Where does this take you? Does this take you to your 40-year-old self? Does this take you to your 12-year-old self? Who's present right now with you in this place you're leaning in, this discomfort that you're leaning in? Who's with you? Oh, it's the 3-year-old. My goodness. Well, look at her. And how is she experiencing this discomfort? How are you going to take care of her? How are you going to love her? How are you going to make sure she's not afraid so she doesn't pull you back from the lesson? Yeah. So the collective work that's necessary begins with the individual journey around vulnerability and radical honesty, and having the wherewithal to realize, yeah, I want to do this and I cannot do it by myself. And so how do I call forth, manifest, call to me the right journey mates or teachers or kindred to walk with me, to be with me, to bear witness with me, to hold me, to teach me, to hold me accountable, to laugh with me, to cry with me. Like, how do I call those people forth? Because if you start, you know, with the science of conjure, it's like once you like move from that little bit of bead that you kind of toying with 3 o'clock in the morning in your own head by yourself, and you have the audacity to actually like let it come out of your mouth in front of someone else, so they bear witness to that little bead that you've been maybe massaging for years by yourself. And you're like, I'm just, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to say it. Bloop. And as soon as you let that joker out, your witness will be like, I saw that. And here you go. What you going to do? So.
That feels like there was a question about collective liberation, and I think you just answered it. With leaning into discomfort and vulnerability and radical honesty and being in community, and that we need each other, right? And being witnessed and believing we can conjure and manifest, but we have to say it out loud and then be available for the journey, which is not always going to be easy or comfortable. That just made me be like, oh, that's liberation. Like in those moments, we feel some ease or freedom. You know, it's not all just discomfort that's present. And once we're able to be with it, then maybe we find some freedom. Like,
it's true.
Yeah.
It's like when you're able to find somebody to say the most horrible thing that you believe about yourself, which is so not true. Like, it's never actually true. The most horrible thing you believe about yourself is never actually true, right? To have someone bear witness to that and just hold that for you, so that way it's up and out of your body. And then you get to be like, okay, so now what? What am I doing with that? This thing around westernized ways of managing grief, death, and dying, and time has been very interesting to bear witness to, because it's like we don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to feel uncomfortable, and I also don't want to bear witness to your discomfort. So if you are going through a process where you are either caring for someone or you yourself is trying to negotiate what's happening with your own body, I don't want to see you uncomfortable. So I might, push back, or I might become like unreasonably enthusiastic around you overcoming, as opposed to becoming more grounded around what's real and what's true, and asking you, what do you want and what do you need? It's like the cheerleader, like, you're gonna beat this thing, it's gonna be great, everything's gonna be fine. Like, not everything is not always fine. Actually, that's not always true, that everything's gonna be fine. This is gonna be real. This is what it's gonna be. It's gonna be real. It's gonna be yours, which means it's gonna be unique to you, and you actually do have so much agency to be able to say, and this is what I want for what's real for me. I want this. Can you do it? And if you can't do it, then you need to get out the way and allow someone else who feels like they have enough spaciousness in their own heart or the way they move to help this person. Get out. Don't block that. Yeah. So, and it's not for everybody. So I do think that there is a collective opportunity for learning and shifting around our understanding and relationship to grief or death and dying. I don't think that everyone has the constitution or the disposition to be up close to it in that way, in the ways in which we've discussed, today, around people being a death doula or something like that. Like, and that's fine. It's fine. My wish, though, is that everybody is afforded the opportunity to be, I don't know, relieved in some way of fear that what's happening is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Oh, I wish they didn't have to die. Well, we all actually are going to die. Mm-hmm. Every single, not one of us is not going to die. So I wish that for myself. I wish that for my boys. I wish that for my girlfriends. Like, how do you kind of like rise up as much as you can? And if there's fear present, be like, well, what's my relationship with this? To have an honest relationship with it. Like, I'm nervous. Yeah, let's talk. Well, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be confused. I think that's what I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Like, I'm wanting people to be really okay with the emotion and the truth of the emotion, if that makes sense.
Yes.
One of the conversations I've had a lot with Sir Taj, my 11-year-old, is around emotional intelligence. We talk about it all the time, right? I think that he is a fairly emotionally intelligent kid. Mm-hmm. One emotion he definitely does not want to have any relationship or connection to is anger. Nope. If he's sad, we can go to the depths of, what's making you sad? What do you need? Let's talk about it. If he's happy, if he's confused, if he's scared, but if he's angry, he does not want to go there. And I was like, it is important for you to find the truth of who you are in all of your emotions. All of them. Because if you cut off this connection you have to anger, when you're angry, what makes you angry, how you feel when you're angry, when it shows up and it gets out of control, mm-hmm. I don't know what's going to happen to you or to people who are around you when that anger shows up that way, mm-hmm. because you have not tended to it. You've not explored what you need when you're angry, because you don't even want to admit that you are angry.
Right.
He was like, I hate that. He's like, I hate that feeling. I hate it. I said, yeah, I get it. But you do experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And so lying to yourself about it is not useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's right. That feels tied to collective liberation too, and vulnerability and radical honesty. And I could talk to you forever and ever, and I would love to. And I'm wondering if you would share anything about where people can find you. You're doing a lot of creative work. I know it because I see you on social media. Where can people find you, or what you're creating, right? Or if you want people to be able to connect with you, how could they?
Yeah, thank you. I decided I wanted to collect stories of Black women who are journeying with menopause or postmenopausal. And like, I try to figure out like, well, how can people access these stories? So I created a podcast. And the podcast is called The Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. It is more than a podcast about the science of menopause or the medical experience of menopause. It's really like a space where older Black women just get to shoot the shit about life, right? So how are you experiencing your body, love, intimacy, pleasure, change? What do you want to be when you grow up, when you're 50 or 60 or 80, you know? And the questions that people don't ask you anymore when you get to a certain age around what's bringing you joy? What are you scared of? What makes you happy? What makes you sad? People don't want to have those conversations with older Black women. So we get relegated to the station of elder without any real authentic relationship. It feels so transactional to be gifted with eldership without like real care or people really wanting to bear witness to who you are in your humanity as an older person. Is when you're older, people think, oh, you got it all together. And it's like, there's so much vulnerability and learning that gets to happen throughout your entire life. So the podcast, you can follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Anchor FM. My IG page for the podcast is The Black Girl's Guide to Menopause. And I'm just posting all manner of things that have to do with disrupting or decolonizing notions around aging and body and like what we're experiencing and asking questions. And I also have a Facebook page that's also called The Black Girl's Guide to Menopause. So we do the podcast, and we also, like, I'm trying to be very intentional about hosting intergenerational conversations with BIPOC folk to be like, listen, we all experience our bodies. We all experience love and change and intimacy. So it is not a space where I, as a 52-year-old person, gets to impart some wisdom or lived experience with a 27-year-old person. It's us grappling with the same question, right? So if the question is about intimacy, we both answer the question from our first person perspective. And we get to realize, you know what, it doesn't matter how old you get or how young you are. We're all struggling with these questions. We're all experiencing these truths. And I'm really enjoying that. We did it in DC. We did it in Durham. I'm going to get to tease some of this out and test it out in Kenya. So I'm really interested to see how that conversation translates on the continent and how people respond to that. But that's, you know, we're gonna keep doing more conversations with folk in 2020. Yeah.
Thank you for the work you do and the practices. I keep trying to move away from work, that word work. Thank you for being you and doing what you do.
Thank you for being you as well. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm just so grateful for our conversation and that we got to talk about Cynthia. That felt really sacred and special. So thank you for sharing a story about our dear friend and comrade and beloved, and
Absolutely.
for everything you shared. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
She's very, very tickled by this conversation, I'm sure.
I'm sure she is.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Shell.
Yeah, good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And I'm looking forward to seeing this in its full production.
Yes.
All right. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right.